Karoline Leavitt stood at the edge of the Fox News stage, her deep blue suit catching the glow of the overhead lights. The 27-year-old White House press secretary could hear the crowd beyond the curtain, buzzing with anticipation. Moments earlier, Robert De Niro had taken the stage and lit a verbal fuse. "Trump is a disaster," he declared with venom, "and Karoline Leavitt is just his puppet." The crowd reacted with a mixed chorus of cheers and boos. Phones went up. The moment was already going viral, but Karoline didn't flinch. Gripping the microphone in one hand and a folder in the other, her heart thundered, but her eyes remained steady. She was here not just to defend herself, but to dismantle a legend. This wasn't just another Fox News segment. It was a generational clash, a battle between old Hollywood and new conservative power. Before we dive into the full story, comment where you're watching from and don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss the next one. The studio lights weren't just on, they were scorching. The Fox News set glimmered like a political coliseum, bathed in red, white, and electric blue. Sean Hannity stood at center stage with his signature smirk, eyes locked on the teleprompter. The crowd buzzed, a chaotic symphony of anticipation as producers counted down from 5. And then, with a voice as familiar to America as the news cycle itself, Hannity leaned into the camera. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, drawing out every syllable with deliberate flair. He's never been one to hold back, never been afraid to speak his mind. A Hollywood icon, a man of 1,000 roles. Please welcome Robert De Niro. The audience erupted. Liberals roared with glee. Conservatives rolled their eyes or booed under their breath. De Niro's name alone was enough to divide the room, and that's exactly what he wanted. From the side wing, De Niro emerged slowly, like a king entering a battlefield. He wore a perfectly tailored black suit, the kind that whispered old money and whispered louder, "I belong here." His silver hair was slicked back, his chin raised, every movement calculated. He approached the microphone with the swagger of a man who'd played mob bosses, war veterans, and courtroom legends, and now believed he was one in real life. His voice was a low, cutting growl, each word sharpened with intent. "I'm here for one reason," he began, locking eyes with the camera as if it were the American public itself. "To tell the truth, Donald Trump isn't just a political problem, he's a national crisis. And Karoline Leavitt," he scoffed, pausing for effect, "she's just the latest accessory to that disaster. A Gen Z press secretary with a memorized script and a polished smile." Half the audience roared in approval, the other half bristled, arms crossed, waiting to see where this would go. De Niro's gaze shifted to them next. He fed off the division like oxygen. "You want real talk?" he continued, stepping forward, his hands moving in tight gestures like a veteran stage actor. "I've played gangsters, tyrants, and revolutionaries for decades, but Trump's not acting. He's the real deal, the most dangerous con man we've ever seen. And this kid, this carefully packaged Catholic girl with a Bible quote and a press pass, she's his decoy. She's the one they roll out to make the chaos look classy. And it's working. That should terrify you." He paced the stage now, drawing every eye. 27 years old, he said, shaking his head as if in disbelief. She wasn't even out of college when Trump was in the White House. She doesn't know the Cold War, doesn't know 9/11, doesn't know anything about American grit. But she's up here acting like she speaks for the soul of the country? Give me a break. The camera zoomed in as De Niro raised a hand and pointed at the curtain with theatrical force. "Come out, Karoline. Come out and show us what today's talking points look like." The studio practically shook as the crowd exploded in a storm of noise. Phones shot up, social media feeds lit up. You could feel it in the air. Something major was about to go down. Sean Hannity, ever the orchestrator, chuckled into his mic. "Well, Bob," he said, barely concealing the glee in his voice, "you just might get your wish, because Karoline Leavitt is backstage right now, and she's coming out live." The crowd screamed louder. The energy in the room shifted again, like the final moments before a championship fight. Meanwhile, backstage, Karoline Leavitt stood frozen, not with fear, but with absolute focus. Her hands were steady, her breath controlled, but her eyes blazed with fire. She wasn't rattled, she was calculating. On the nearby monitor, she watched De Niro monologue, strut, smirk. She caught every insult, every jab, every smear. And then, without a word, she turned to her assistant. "Cue it," she said calmly. The aide tapped the screen on a nearby tablet. A familiar video loaded. CNN 2016, Robert De Niro, smiling ear to ear, saying the words that would soon haunt him. "Barack Obama is one of the smartest, most dignified presidents we've ever had. A true visionary. The volume on the tablet was low, but Karoline didn't need it. She'd memorized every frame. She watched De Niro's expression in the clip, studied his tone, then she smiled. Not a grin, but a quiet, knowing smirk. "Perfect," she said. "Put it on the big screen the second I give the nod." The aide nodded, barely able to hide their anticipation. This wasn't just going to be a rebuttal. It was going to be a demolition. She inhaled sharply, the kind of breath that wasn't just for oxygen, but for clarity, for preparation. She exhaled with intent, grounding herself in the moment. And then, Karoline Leavitt stepped into the light. The reaction was instantaneous. The crowd didn't just react, they erupted. MAGA supporters leapt to their feet, voices booming with chants and claps, their red hats bobbing in unison like waves of fire. They weren't just cheering, they were claiming her, their voice on that stage, their fighter in the arena, the right's rising champion. At the same time, groans and boos echoed from the liberal corners of the audience. Some jeered, some rolled their eyes, others started live streaming with smug captions like, "Here comes Trump's puppet." But their confidence didn't rattle her. It charged her. Every boo was fuel. Every sneer made her spine straighter. Her heels struck the studio floor like a metronome of war. Click, click, click. Each step louder than the last, measured and sharp, echoing through the arena like a countdown to impact. Her tailored navy suit glinted under the harsh studio lights. Her blonde hair was pulled back, her shoulders square, her eyes forward. There was no hesitation, no nerves, just purpose. She reached center stage and stopped just feet from Robert De Niro, Hollywood royalty glaring at her with a faint sneer, arms folded like a king awaiting an apology. She didn't give one. Karoline raised the microphone with ease. The audience quieted immediately, as if the air itself had gone still. Even Hannity leaned back, knowing what was about to come was not politics. It was performance. It was power. "Mr. De Niro," she said, her voice firm but smooth, not loud but unmistakably commanding. "I heard every word you said. You called me a puppet, a mouthpiece, a clueless kid, but let's talk about who's actually out of touch here." A low murmur rippled through the audience. Liberals stiffened. Conservatives leaned forward. "You've spent the last decade shouting at crowds, ranting on late-night shows, and calling half the country names. Every time there's a mic near you, you attack millions of Americans who dare to disagree with you. And for what? Applause from cocktail parties? High fives from Hollywood execs?" She took a step closer. "You made millions playing tough guys, but tonight, you're not acting, you're exposed. And you're finally facing someone who doesn't need a script, a trailer, or a studio edit to speak truth to your fiction." A wave of oohs rose from the MAGA side. De Niro's smug posture faltered for a second. And then, without breaking eye contact, Karoline gave a sharp nod to the production crew. The massive screen behind them lit up like a courtroom bombshell. The clip played in crisp HD CNN 2016, Robert De Niro on a panel, beaming. Barack Obama is one of the smartest, most thoughtful visionary leaders we've ever had. The clip paused, frozen on De Niro's smiling face. The irony smacked the room like a gavel. Karoline slowly turned back to face him, letting the silence soak in. The moment was heavy, cinematic, her words cut like a scalpel. "You praised Obama, you smiled while doing it, called him a visionary, the very man Donald Trump replaced. The very policies Trump dismantled and reformed. And now you stand here calling Trump a disaster." She tilted her head slightly. "You applauded what Trump corrected, so Mr. De Niro, tell the country again, who's the puppet?" The crowd exploded. Hannity's eyebrows shot up. Conservative spectators were out of their seats, roaring with approval. Even undecided guests looked rattled by the reversal. But Karoline wasn't finished, not even close. "You mocked my faith," she continued. "You mocked my age. As if those things disqualify me. As if being 27 makes me naive and believing in something bigger than myself makes me a fool." Her gaze sharpened, her tone cooled. "But here's the part you'll never understand. I wasn't born into a mansion. I wasn't handed a $20 million film contract. I grew up in a working class family in New Hampshire. I went to public school. I stood in line at gas stations when prices soared. I worked my way through college while people like you were being chauffeured to red carpets." She glanced briefly at the cameras. "I know what Americans go through, not because I watched a documentary, because I lived it." The room pulsed with energy. Even some liberal heads turned slightly. "And you?" she asked, swinging her attention back to De Niro. "You live in a mansion paid for by decades of movies where you pretend to be strong. You mock people like me from behind a screen. You think middle America is beneath you, but tonight, you're facing one of us." The laughter that followed came not from a joke, but from vindication. And since you brought up Trump's leadership, she said with a raised brow, let's talk about your own. The crowd hushed again. Your film, The Alto Knights, bombed. $40 million up in flames. Critics called it confused, dated, and a cautionary tale in career decline. That's not leadership, Mr. De Niro. That's delusion. That's you pretending to be relevant while America moves on. A few gasps, some claps, and one loud MAGA voice from the back yelling, she's cooking him. Karoline let the silence linger just long enough. Tonight isn't about politics, she added. It's about truth versus performance. You've played Vito Corleone, you've played Travis Bickle, but this stage, this moment, it's not a movie, and I'm not your co-star. She stepped back, lowered the mic slightly, and stared De Niro down. And spoiler alert, this time the script isn't going your way. Robert De Niro's face went pale, then flushed a deep red like a kettle finally hitting a boil. His jaw clenched. He inhaled sharply, a comeback clearly loading behind his gritted teeth. But before a single syllable could escape his mouth, Karoline raised her voice, cutting through the static of tension like a blade. You say I read from a script? She said, pausing just long enough to let the silence land. Everything I've said tonight, every sentence, every syllable, is mine. My voice, my beliefs, my experience. I didn't need cue cards or teleprompters. I didn't need writers feeding me lines backstage. Because when you believe in something, when you live it, you don't need a script. She turned toward the crowd, raising the mic with conviction. But you, Mr. De Niro, your entire life has been one long performance. From Vito Corleone to Travis Bickle, your legacy is built on fiction. You mastered pretending to be powerful, pretending to be moral, pretending to fight for justice. But those were just roles, characters. None of them were real. Her voice dipped lower, colder as she turned back to face him. I'm not pretending. I represent something real. I represent a movement. I represent millions of Americans who are tired of being lectured by actors who've spent more time in makeup chairs than in middle-class communities. You stand on a pedestal built by Hollywood, and tonight that pedestal is crumbling. The audience roared to life. The MAGA supporters surged to their feet, clapping, chanting her name like a rally crowd in full swing. Karoline, Karoline. It wasn't just applause, it was momentum, energy, the unmistakable signal that a cultural shift was happening right there, live on air. Karoline stepped forward, her tone softening, but only to grow sharper. You called me Trump's puppet, but no, Mr. De Niro, I'm his soldier. There's a difference. Gasps rippled from the crowd. Even Hannity blinked in surprise. I've been with him since college. I've fought for conservative values when it was unpopular. When people like you mocked us from red carpets, I was knocking doors. When elites like you dismissed working families, I was standing with them in town halls. You took scripts. I took risks. You performed. I persevered. The conservative crowd went wild again, fists in the air, hats lifted, some even tearing up. It wasn't just a rebuttal, it was a revelation. Karoline paused only when Hannity, smiling nervously, leaned in. Bob, he asked, almost like a referee interrupting a knockout round, do you want to respond? De Niro stood slowly, tension in every joint. His hands shook slightly. His voice, once rich with swagger, now carried a quiver beneath the surface. You think this is funny? He snapped. I've stood in front of thousands. I've marched against corruption. I've spoken out against dictators and demagogues. I don't need some 27-year-old, a freshman press secretary, lecturing me about truth. But his voice lacked its previous weight. The confidence had been replaced with something else. Resentment, defensiveness. A man who suddenly realized the stage didn't belong to him anymore. Karoline raised her hand, not to interrupt, but to finish him. Then why are you rattled, Mr. De Niro? The studio detonated. The audience exploded like a fuse had been lit. People were on their feet, some screaming, some laughing, some filming with wide-eyed disbelief. Even the production crew looked stunned behind the cameras. Karoline held firm in the chaos. You've called Trump every name in the book, she said, her voice steady. You've thrown every insult, given every soundbite, shouted into every microphone for years. But despite all that, he's still here, still leading, still winning. She extended her hand to the crowd as if to introduce the undeniable. And now, he's got a new generation behind him. Young, fearless, ready. People who aren't afraid of celebrity power. People who don't swoon at Oscars. People who can see through the noise and say enough is enough. De Niro tried to speak over the growing chants, but Karoline kept control of the stage like a lion tamer holding a whip. "You can't handle that," she continued. "You can't handle the fact that you and your Hollywood elite don't dictate the culture anymore, because we've seen what you're selling, and we're not buying it." Desperate to reclaim ground, De Niro shouted into his mic, "You're just another loudmouth for Trump, just another puppet with a pretty suit and a talking point." Without missing a beat, Karoline turned and delivered the line that would flood X and YouTube within the hour. "And you're just another bitter celebrity trying to stay relevant." Gasps, loud, raw, electric. The sound wasn't just from shock, it was from recognition. Everyone in that room knew they'd just witnessed the moment the tide turned. Karoline didn't gloat, she didn't grin, she simply stood there, posture poised, eyes unwavering, like someone who'd just placed the final stone in an argument she didn't need to win, but already had. The crowd was electric, no, supercharged. Energy pulsed through the studio like a lightning storm had struck the Fox News stage. People were on their feet, some cheering, some laughing, some looking around in disbelief at what they'd just witnessed. Phones were up, capturing every second. The line, "And you're done," was already being replayed in real time on social media stories across the country. Karoline stood still, letting the thunderous reaction settle, then slowly turned to the crowd with a sly, knowing smile. "Let's take a vote," she said, raising her mic, her voice cutting through the cheers like a conductor signaling an encore. "Who here thinks Mr. De Niro should finally retire?" The reaction was instant and overwhelming. The conservative half of the room roared like a stadium. Cheers, whistles, shouts of "retire," and "you're done, Bobby," echoed off the studio walls. Even a few in the liberal corner, caught in the moment, couldn't help but smile or shake their heads in stunned amusement. The camera panned to De Niro, still seated, still frozen, his jaw clenched, his eyes cast downward. The same man who strutted in with the swagger of a two-time Oscar winner now looked like he'd been hit with a political freight train. Sean Hannity, grinning ear to ear, raised both hands like a referee ending a title fight. All right, he chuckled. "I think we've got our answer, folks. I don't even need a show of hands. This crowd just cast their ballot." Laughter and applause exploded again. As the commercial break rolled in, the buzz in the studio reached a near fever pitch. The air itself seemed to vibrate with energy, a strange mix of shock, awe, and viral momentum already taking root. The lights dimmed slightly as the cameras powered down, but there was no pause in intensity behind the scenes. The studio floor erupted in orchestrated chaos. Staffers in suits darted between equipment, interns held phones to their ears, producers barked into earpieces, scrambling to segment and clip the footage. Every second mattered. They weren't just producing TV anymore, they were curating a cultural bombshell in real time. Inside the control room, a dozen monitors glowed with live feeds, instant replays, waveform audio, and TikTok drafts already in the pipeline. Editors worked with military precision. Someone shouted, "That's the moment, pause there, loop that, zoom in on his face." They knew what they had. They didn't just capture a moment, they'd recorded a seismic shift, one clip away from becoming internet history. De Niro, meanwhile, had shrunk into his chair like a man realizing too late that he walked into the wrong arena. Slowly, he leaned back, shoulders heavier than when he arrived. The flush in his cheeks faded into a pale stillness. His hands, once animated with dramatic flair, now tapped nervously at the armrest. A tell. The kind actors try to hide, but body language always reveals. His fire hadn't been extinguished by facts. It was doused by reality. He hadn't lost a political argument. He'd been publicly outclassed by someone half his age and twice as composed. Karoline, on the other hand, stood like she'd rehearsed this moment not in a mirror, but in real battle. She didn't gloat. She didn't break character. She was steel, poised. Her heels clicked softly on the studio floor as she approached her aide and whispered a word. Just one. It was all it took. The aide, already anticipating the order, pulled out a tablet, tapped a few times, and began exporting the clip. Everyone in that inner circle knew they were sitting on a powder keg, and at that exact moment, 3 minutes after the commercial break, the official Fox News X account dropped the clip. The caption was simple, brutal, and brilliant. Karoline Leavitt to De Niro, "You live in luxury mansions. I live in reality. Watch what happens next." And just like that, it exploded. Within 90 seconds, the hashtags were climbing faster than any paid campaign ever could. The Karoline crushes De Niro. "You're done, Bob." Gen Z vs Hollywood. Killer Karoline. Trending tabs lit up like Christmas trees. Notifications pinged non-stop. Screenshots spread like wildfire across group chats, political forums, and meme pages. On Instagram Reels, influencers wasted no time turning her closing remarks into cinematic content. Dramatic bass drops, glitch effects, slow motion. Some edited it like a movie trailer, others turned it into a campaign ad. Likes didn't just trickle in, they poured. Within 15 minutes, Karoline's mic drop had hit the algorithm jackpot. Meme pages jumped in, mixing pop culture references with her quotes. A clip of De Niro blinking blankly got paired with the SpongeBob "Ite Emma head out" overlay. It amassed 500,000 likes in an hour. But one meme stood above the rest. A side-by-side still, De Niro mid-glare, teeth clenched, eyes burning. Captioned, "You talking to me?" Next to it, Karoline, posture locked, eyes cold and focused. Captioned, "Yes, and you're done." It was reposted across thousands of Telegram groups, reshared on Reddit's conservative forums, and pinned to political influencers' timelines. TikTok edits layered her voice with echo effects. GIFs of her silencing De Niro became the new reaction content across conservative Twitter. Even liberal-leaning commentators had to acknowledge the impact, if only to try and minimize it. And then the political A-listers jumped in. Donald J. Trump broke his silence by posting directly to Truth Social and X. Karoline Leavitt was incredible tonight, took down De Niro with class, truth, and fire. So proud of her. Within the hour, it hit 1.3 million views and climbed steadily. Conservative influencers reposted it with captions like, "This is what leadership looks like." Gen Z isn't silent anymore. She buried him without raising her voice. Charlie Kirk fired off another tweet. A cultural shift just happened live on Fox News. Karoline Leavitt didn't just challenge De Niro, she dismantled the illusion of celebrity power. Gen Z is here, and it's conservative. Candace Owens followed with, "This is the new face of the right, and the left has no idea how to deal with it." Benny Johnson dropped a reaction video titled, "Why Karoline Leavitt's Mic Drop Just Ended Hollywood Politics." It hit 1 million views in under 8 hours. And the reactions weren't limited to influencers. State senators, house reps, school board candidates all began quoting her. Her clip became rally footage. Her face appeared on shirts, bumper stickers, even mugs. The studio audience had cheered, but the internet made her immortal. This wasn't just a media moment, it was a movement. And Karoline Leavitt was now its face. Meanwhile, legacy media outlets scrambled in real time to contain the cultural wildfire ignited on live television. Networks like MSNBC, CNN, and The View entered full-blown damage control mode, desperate to frame what had just unfolded as irrelevant political theater. MSNBC's social team rolled out a heavily edited segment titled, "Why Karoline's Moment Doesn't Matter," but the American public wasn't buying it. The comments flooded in almost instantly. "It matters," one user wrote. "She shattered the Hollywood facade in under 5 minutes. Another chimed in, "They're panicking because she said what we've all been thinking." CNN's coverage carried a desperate tone, running a chyron that read, "De Niro versus Leavitt, culture clash or conservative theater?" The segment teetered between awkward satire and forced neutrality. Anchors clutched their cue cards, trying to convince their shrinking audience that this wasn't the seismic moment it clearly was. But out on social media, the debate was over. Karoline hadn't just won a spat with a celebrity, she had redefined what it means to take the narrative back. Commentators, left, right, and centrist began calling it what it was, the night the tide shifted. It wasn't just political, it was generational, a symbolic crack in the veneer of old Hollywood liberalism and a spotlight on the emergence of unapologetic conservative youth. Karoline Leavitt, a name many hadn't heard days before, had just challenged the status quo and won with poise, facts, and conviction. The media elites were left grasping for air. What followed was nothing short of a political earthquake. The next morning, every mainstream network had no choice but to cover the moment. Whether in mockery or dismay, the headlines were saturated with her name. MSNBC's Roundtable dismissed the exchange as a MAGA media stunt. CNN brought on analysts who framed it as a misunderstanding between generations. The View delivered a monologue calling it performance politics at its worst, though even they couldn't hide the tension. But the real problem for them wasn't misinformation, it was visibility. America had seen it, unfiltered and in real time. They'd watched Karoline go toe-to-toe with a Hollywood juggernaut and dominate him, not by screaming, not by smearing, but by calmly dismantling the elite narrative line by line. It was undeniable, and the spin doctors were helpless to rewrite what the world had witnessed. Meanwhile, De Niro's publicist released a cold, corporate statement the next day. Mr. De Niro stands by his words and his long history of speaking truth to power. But the damage had already spread. There was no apology, no rebuttal, no attempt to defend his mockery. And in silence, perception calcified. De Niro wasn't the cultural lion anymore. He was the man who underestimated Gen Z and got blindsided on national TV. From there, Karoline's rise was explosive. Conservative media couldn't book her fast enough. Within 72 hours, she had appeared on The Daily Wire, Turning Point, Timcast, and even earned an exclusive with Megyn Kelly. Each clip went viral, each interview dissected like a State of the Union address. Media outlets scrambled to keep up. Fox News re-uploaded her Hannity segment with added transitions, musical underscores, and frame-by-frame breakdowns. One version, set to Hans Zimmer's Time, amassed 4 million views in 24 hours. Charlie Kirk summed up the phenomenon in one tweet that exploded across the internet. She just rewrote the rules. Killer Karoline is the future. It was reposted over 80,000 times in less than 48 hours. Twitter feeds filled with fan art, stylized quotes, and animated reenactments of the confrontation. One account posted, "She didn't just win an argument, she started a fire." Fox News couldn't contain the digital avalanche. Their upload of the exchange soared to 15 million views in 5 days, overwhelming their servers at one point. Comment sections resembled stadium chants. She ended him. This is how you stand for something. 27 years old and she's already making history. And then came the White House press briefing, the one that would cement her new status. It had only been 4 days since the De Niro clash, but the West Wing was buzzing like a campaign rally. Veteran reporters squeezed in beside TikTok creators and Substack independents, all hoping to catch the next headline-making quote. The second she stepped up to the podium, a hand shot into the air. "Karoline," a reporter asked, "what's your response to the backlash after your confrontation with Robert De Niro?" She paused for half a second, collected, then delivered the line that would dominate news cycles for the next week. "I don't speak for Hollywood," she said coolly. "I speak for the American people." The room murmured, cameras clicked, and the internet ignited. That single quote exploded across platforms. TikTok creators stitched it into viral edits. Instagram users made it into merch. Conservative politicians adopted it into speeches. One Senate candidate in Texas opened his rally with it. Another printed it on campaign shirts. It wasn't just a soundbite, it was a political brand. From that moment on, the momentum was irreversible. What De Niro's camp intended as a PR demolition turned into a coronation. Karoline didn't just weather the storm, she redirected it. Robert De Niro thought Oscars and reputation would silence youth and faith, but he underestimated the moment, and more importantly, he underestimated her. Karoline wasn't forged in red carpet interviews. She was built on policy briefings, campaign rallies, and faith. She knew her values, she knew her message. And that night, she proved that America is ready for a new kind of voice. One that's young, bold, unafraid, and above all, authentic. She didn't just win the night. She defined a movement. Don't forget to like and subscribe. See you in the next episode.